Hello watch enthusiasts. Now today I'm going to do a review of a wristwatch which was very kindly sent to me by Xezo wristwatches, which has been sent to me, so I will be completely impartial, but more about that in just a moment. Firstly, I'd really like to thank you all profusely for your very kind support over the year that I've been around for, because it has now been my year's anniversary since the formation of this channel. And I'd also like to thank you immensely for your support on the Bezelous Newcomer of the Year award, which I have won with a 37% vote for my channel. And I really couldn't have come this far, which is around 4,000 subscribers now, without your very kind support and help. So I really am immensely grateful, and I hope that I can produce videos for you all into the distant future. Now, I must say, I'd never dreamt when I started this channel of reaching this level in the world of horology, and I'm extremely pleased that you enjoy my videos and enjoy the content which I put forward. It really is wonderful to see. Now, if you would like to see the award on the Bezelous website, then I will include a link in the description down below, so just go and have a look at that if you're interested. Now, on to the main article of this video, which is a review of a wristwatch which was kindly sent to me by Xezo. Now, this is a watch company which has been around for a while now, for 15 years, and they've made a number of watches around a sort of an aviation and nautical theme. So this watch here is at base an aviation watch, but incorporates a number of features which one would more often see on a dive watch. Now, so as I've said, they've been producing watches since 2001, and have made a number of watches with chronograph calibers, normal ETA movements, equally GMTs. So they really do produce a wide range of wristwatches. Now, before I commence this review, I would like to point out this watch has been sent to me for free. In some cases, some viewers might think that I will be partial and not completely honest about this watch, but I will be completely impartial. I do make it very clear to people before I review wristwatches that this is what I do, in order to be sincere to my viewers, which I feel is very important, because one really must be able to trust someone who's reviewing a product, otherwise that defeats the object of the exercise. So with that said, I shall start this review, and this particular model is the Xezo D45-G, G standing for grey, which is or gunmetal, which is the PVD coating on this watch. So it comes in this box which you see here, which is finished in a sort of an alligator grain style, as you can see from this finishing. Now, the box also features the website down at the bottom, and equally the fact that this watch is limited edition of 500. Now, the box opens like so to reveal the wristwatch on a cushion. Now, I'll place that to one side just to show you what else is in the box, first of all. Now, in the box, which opens in this rather interesting way, which I find particularly appealing, as a change to normal watch boxes, because many watch boxes simply open in the normal fashion, and it's nice to see a company which is trying to do something different. But in the front of this, there's this cover here, and this covers up a section which would normally be able to accommodate rings and so on, and which is again a practical feature, and I found that very useful putting bracelet end links if, say, one takes the watch off the bracelet. Equally in here there is a small booklet and an international guarantee card, again for the warranty, which is 1 year on this wristwatch. Now I'll put the box aside and show you the wristwatch itself. This is the wristwatch itself. So here we see a large 45mm case. Now I'll get onto sizing in just a moment, but first of all I'd like to talk about the basics of this watch. So it's a 45mm case with a sapphire crystal, with again a sapphire cyclops over the top. Equally, the bezel is painted; it's not ceramic, but I'll get onto that as well. It also has an internal rotating bezel, as well as an external bezel, which is unidirectional. The top of the case is brushed, while the sides have this polished finish, which I think is very attractive, in my opinion, and matches the bezel rather nicely, which is also polished. The case back isn't PVD coated, but is an exhibition case back, which is, again, a nice feature to see. The bracelet is again stainless steel and PVD coated, as is the clasp. Now I'll talk about the head of the watch first of all. So again, it's a stainless steel case which has then been PVD coated in this gunmetal finish. Now this is rather different to normal PVD coatings, which are usually black, and I must say I'm not usually a fan of PVD coatings. I used to be, but recently I've been put off a lot of dark watches. But it's nice to see a PVD coating which isn't that black colour, but rather a grey, which again does add variety to a watch, and is again something which I appreciate. It also matches the dial, which is this sunburst grey, and which I think is rather nicely finished. And again, those hands are very highly legible on that grey dial. Now again, on the case we also see a unidirectional bezel. Now the bezel is a 90-click bezel, which I'm sure many people will be thinking is rather a peculiar number to have. And I do as well. It is a slightly bizarre number to have because it doesn't mean that you get 1 or 2 clicks per minute, but rather 1 click per 45 seconds, which is something which threw me at first. But it does have a very, very nice action, and turns very nicely, and there is no play in this bezel whatsoever, which is sometimes a complaint I have with watches. Again, the sides of this bezel are PVD coated and polished, which does lend for a rather lustrous look to the front of the wristwatch, while still allowing it to be quite subdued due to that PVD coating. Now again, the bezel turns around rather nicely and is graduated all around, which is again something I like, because a lot of watches have the graduations merely to 15, and this just does improve legibility quite significantly. Now I did mention earlier that the bezel insert isn't ceramic, it's painted. And some people, like I, believe that actually ceramic is a lot better than painted bezels. But that said, here an effort has been made, and is something I appreciate, and it suits this watch better than I think a ceramic bezel would. And that is, if I bring it very close to the camera just to demonstrate, the numerals are in fact raised above the stainless steel insert, which gives a great texture to it and actually adds more grip, which is something which I hadn't considered when looking at pictures of this watch. So they actually add more grip if one grips the top of the bezel as well as the edge, which is an interesting touch. It also does give this watch an old-fashioned look, as well as having this very contemporary look of the case. These particular types of Arabic numerals do look very old-fashioned in their style. Now, equally, as far as other bezels go, we have an internal bezel which is controlled by this crown, which is placed at 10 o'clock. Now, it's bidirectional and can be used for one of two things. Either one can move it to the hour hand, and then, for example, place the bezel so that the bezel is pointing at the minute hand. Now, this allows one to not just time 1 hour, but in fact time up to 12 hours, and how long they take to elapse, which is helpful in the context this watch is an aviation piece, hence the numerals and the hands, rather than being a dive watch where actually one would only need really an hour. So I can understand this feature being useful on this sort of watch, which is again something I appreciate. Now again, the bezel does turn back, and this is also loomed on the inside, but I'll show you a picture of the loom towards the end of the video. Now, the Sapphire Crystal is in fact flat, as you can see. There we are, it's flat, but with this large cyclops which sits proud of the crystal. Now, this cyclops is a 2.5 magnification cyclops, and it is clearly visible. It's substantially better than other cyclopses I've seen. It doesn't quite have the magnification of a Rolex cyclops, but it does offer a very good magnification for the price of this watch. Now, the crown is a screw-down crown on this side, which helps the watch to be water-resistant to 300 meters, and it unscrews rather nicely. It's fairly smooth action, and the movement inside this watch is a Miyota 9015, which I will show you through the case back in just a moment. So that is manually winding, so it's hand winding, as well as hackable, as you can see, which is again a feature I appreciate, seeing as a lot of Miyota 8215s are seen. Now, obviously, I would prefer an ETA 2824 or 289 series, but that said, for this price, I think actually Miyota is a very sensible option and does offer very well-priced servicing, which I appreciate is a concern for many viewers, because yes, an ETA will offer the sort of prestige of being a Swiss movement, but will also come at a premium when it comes to servicing. So as a result, I can understand wanting a Japanese movement. Now, the movement in this particular watch, I've timed it, and it will in fact run to +4 seconds a day, +4 or 5 seconds a day, which is a very, very admirable timing setting, seeing as these movements can fluctuate from about -20 to +30 a day, in the worst of cases. But in this case, I've seen this watch to be very accurate. Now, I've said the dial is sunburst, as you can see, if I just catch the light with it to better show you. There you are. And it does in fact have quite a complicated text on the dial. So as you see, there is at the top we see the Xezo name, and I'll just move the hands to better show you what it says. As you see, my disorganisation, I really ought to have moved them when I had the crown out the first time. But I'll just move that there. So as you see, we see Xezo at the top, which is of course their brand name, but equally one has a Unite for Good. And that's because a portion of the proceeds of buying one of these watches does in fact go to the charity Unite for Good, which is again something I appreciate, seeing as it is important to give to charity, and in this ever difficult world, it is important to help the disadvantaged. And then again below that we see Air Commander, which is of course the name of the watch, and limited edition of 500, again stating the limited edition of this watch. Now, beneath that, we see 300 meters in red text, which is very difficult to read, even when not looking at it through a camera, simply due to its size, which is again something which I think perhaps needs to be corrected. At the bottom, we see automatic 24 joules, explaining what the movement is, and then we see at the top, in very, very small font, on the internal rotating bezel, Xezo and copyright. Now, the dial has a number of different finishes in terms of the markers. So the numerals are painted on, while the actual indices, these little plots at each hour, are in fact applied, which does give a nice texture to the dial and stops it from being too monotonous and too simple, really. Again, we have a simple white second track around the edge as well. Now, my only complaint really with the dial is to do with the hands. In my opinion, the hands, if I place them next to each other, at a glance are not as legible as perhaps hands which are actually different. Due to their similar length and the fact that the only real difference at a glance between the two hands is that the point extends further on the minute hand, it can be difficult to read at times when looking at it at a glance. Now, the second hand is a simple pointer arrow style hand, which again does offer a good legibility. And I should also point out that the entirety of the hands is loomed. There is a slight divot in the tip of the arrow there, but that's not actually a loom plot, that's merely just a divot for aesthetic purposes. The whole hand is painted with loom. Now, at the back of the wristwatch, we see, again, brushing on the bottom, with the polishing, again, on the sides and the edges of the crown guard. Now, if we look at the back of the watch in particular, one sees it has an exhibition case back, which is also sapphire, which is, again, something pleasant to see on a watch which is a 300-meter diver. Because usually one only sees exhibition casebacks on more expensive divers, simply due to the added technicality of adding a clear caseback. Now, the caseback is again non-PVD stainless steel, which I think was a good choice, because through opening and closing this with a tool, it would wear away the PVD, thus giving this watch a more worn look than it perhaps should. Now on the back, we again see that it again states that it's water resistant to 30 atmospheres, and it has a Citizen automatic movement with a Sapphire Crystal and the stainless steel. And again, we also see this is number 99 of 500. Now the movement is actually rather nicely decorated, considering the price of this watch. You see, it has a Geneva stripe style, so a Côte de Genève, on the back, which is something which I don't expect from a watch of this price. I know I've said that rather a lot, but this watch has impressed me. Again, we also see a nicely signed rotor. The rotor obviously isn't signed particularly incredibly, but it's nice to see that they've at least made the effort of putting a custom rotor on it. Again, the rest of the movement, if I show you the other side, is very, very standard Miyota stuff. But again, this movement, as I've said, keeps a very good time. Now, one thing which I do really appreciate, which I think is perhaps me being pedantic, but even so, a lot of watches which I see for around this price have plastic movement holders. And from my Timex, for example, which used to be my real my beta watch, I suppose. Um, I used to wear rather a lot, and now the dial and the movement actually move inside the case a little bit when you pull the crown out, because actually the movement holder, I believe, has actually been cracked through a shock, which is something which does bother me about buying a watch and then having that issue. Whereas here, one can see around the edges it has a metal or a steel movement holder, which will give the whole watch greater security, which does make me feel more comfortable with this watch. Now, in terms of dimensions, this watch is a large watch. There's no getting away from that. Um, the wristwatch itself is 45 millimeters across, from side to side, so you see from here to here, and the bezel does overlap that ever so slightly. The lug to lug is 54 millimeters, which is very much the absolute limit of watches I can wear. I tend to avoid going over 52, but this watch, because it's quite curved, does fit fairly well. That said, I do have very, very small wrists. Now, it is in fact 13 millimeters thick, which is reasonable, I think, and is quite all right. Obviously, the Cyclops does protrude a little bit, but so far I've had no issues with it catching on things. Now, the tips of the crowns, I haven't shown you this, aren't PVD coated, which does give a little bit of an interesting look to the watch, and does remove the concern that's going to rub off, because I prefer not to put wristwatches bracelet down on the case back to avoid damage, so I tend to place my watch's crown down during the night when they're on bracelets. So it's nice to see they've taken that care there. I don't know if they did it for that reason, but it suits me. Now, the bracelet dimensions in terms of the lug width, we have a 22 millimeter lug width, and the whole watch on the bracelet, which is fully still has all its links. I've been wearing it on a strap this week because I received it mid this week and haven't been able to have it adjusted for my wrist yet. But this watch with the bracelet in its entirety weighs 224 grams, which is rather heavy. But I've taken the watch off the bracelet, and actually it's a perfectly reasonable weight, around the 130 gram mark without the bracelet, which is just fine for me. Now, I will point out the length of this bracelet which they give you, which is immense. And just to demonstrate that, I shall close the clasp and put it onto my wrist without actually opening it. That's how much it actually has. So you can see it slips quite comfortably over my hand and straight on without opening the bracelet. So you can see the sheer size and length of the bracelet when it's new, which does, I think, offer a great level of help for people with larger wrists. And when often people have to order larger bracelets, and for bracelets which are particular in design, that's more difficult than, for example, a simple Oyster Rolex bracelet. Now, the bracelet, I think, will divide people, because many people will dislike this bracelet, others will like it. And I happen to fall into the category where I like its design very much. Now, it has a little bit of play due to the number of links. It does offer an extremely tough and resilient. One feels the weight of this bracelet and the quality when one tries it on, which does impress me. It has these little polished links between the larger brush links, which avoids this watch looking too bright. Now, the clasp this watch is on is a fairly generic clasp at base, but offers great security. So it has a fold over here, which is very firm and clicks very, very nicely. But it has the added safety of a button style system, which then reveals a deployant which is solid and not pressed, which is again something which many buyers will appreciate, and the fact there really is no play in this whatsoever, which will help with wear over the years. Now, my only real complaint with the bracelet is that this bracelet features push pins for adjustment. If I can get that into focus for you, in order to better show you. So these are push pins which one can press out from the other side. And though an effective system, it would have been appreciated to see screws on a watch like this to allow for easier changing and adjustment of the bracelet. When actually most high-end wristwatches and even reasonably low-end wristwatches are now starting to feature these screw pins, which do make life much easier for the average consumer. Not having to take the watch to a specific jeweler to have the bracelet changed or adjusted does make one's life much easier. Now, one thing I will also point out is the fact that this line here through the back of the lugs is flat. Now, that's not a problem, but it's merely an observation that other bracelets that don't have a flat section here shan't fit the case quite the way it does. And now also, I will also say that the links, the end links, are also solid, which does give the whole bracelet a much sturdier feel on the wrist than a hollow end link would, and equally prevents the damage which hollow end links do by gripping onto the sides of the back of the case and causing abrasion. Now, one thing I didn't point out, which I apologise, I neglected to point out when I was showing you the internal rotating bezel, is that one can also use it as a GMT type of bezel. So, say one was travelling to France, which is plus 1 hour ahead of GMT, which is where I live. I live in Greenwich Mean Time, and one can move that bezel then, say, to here, because they're 1 hour ahead. Their 12 o'clock will be at our 11 o'clock. So as a result, that allows one to have a second time zone when travelling, which is again a great thing to have when one doesn't want to have to stop the watch and move the hands, detracting from accuracy when travelling. So I really do appreciate that, considering this watch, with its old-style numerals and highly legible date, do all contribute to this watch being a pilot's watch. It is important this watch has some form of GMT. Now, they do also offer a slightly higher-end version for around $1,000. This watch is $545 usually, but there's a discount code which I'll show you at the end. For around $1,000 with an ETA 289 series movement, which actually has a GMT hand as well, which does offer an extra level of functionality. But for a simple three-handed movement, this watch does offer a great deal of functionality. Now, I'll just turn out the lights now to show you the lume of this watch, which is of course crucial on this watch because of course it's a pilot's watch. So I'll be back with you in just a moment. Okay, so I've now pointed a UV torch at the watch for now 20 seconds in a general direction, just to give a general coating of light to that lume. Now, as you see, it's very bright at first, and this lume, in my experience, lasts about 5 hours. 4 to 5 hours, which is still behind my Oris and my Orient. But apart from those watches, it really does outdo the watches in my collection. Now, it definitely outdoes my 50 fathoms. My 55 fathoms Seiko. I wish I had a 50 fathoms, but there we are. But no, it definitely outdoes the lume of the Seiko, but is still behind the Oris and the Orient. Now, as you see, the hands are very bright, but are difficult to tell apart at times due to their similar shape. The dial itself is very, very well loomed, and of course you see the bezel has that pip at 12, which is also quite clear. My only complaint would be the lume on the internal bezel, which, as you can see, you can only just see that triangle below 12 o'clock, and even that is very faint. So that wears off very, very quickly. But apart from that, the lume is fantastic, considering this watch's price and price point. With only the key Japanese who've been around for a while outdoing them, and the more expensive Oris. Now, I have been issued a discount code for this watch by Xezo to give you all of my good viewers to thank you for watching my video, and that is Armon the Watch Guy 20, all in lowercase and spaced. You'll see it on the screen just now. That'll also be in the description with a link to this wristwatch on the Xezo website, so you can take a look for yourself. But I really do hope you enjoyed this honest review of this watch. As you can see, I really was honest about the watch and pointed out the flaws I saw, while equally pointing out the things and the many things which I do like a lot about this watch. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please do like, share, and subscribe to see more content on this channel. And hopefully you'll enjoy that too. So thank you very much for watching. This is Armon the Watch Guy, over and out.